Joining us now is the congressman from the 1st District of Virginia. Of course, that's going to be changing after the ruling the other day, throwing out the new map in the 3rd District and all that stuff. But no matter, he's still going to be there, and that is Congressman Rob Wittman. Congressman, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. It's great to be with you.
Now, I've got to ask you to give us your thoughts on the ISIS situation. My first question is, are we at war, sir?
Well, absolutely we're at war. I think it's plain as everybody can see the conflict we're pursuing there. By any measure, that's war. Flying those airstrikes in there. We do have folks on the ground there, as you know. Just the other day, because of the situation, John, of what's happening there near Baghdad, we flew for the first time Apache helicopters in, which are close air support. And as you know, you've got to have flight crews there supporting those aircraft. You have to have operators on board those aircraft. So, you know, we are in a conflict, and there are boots on the ground.
The situation, we've got to understand, Congressman Wittman, about 1,600 troops in Iraq now. We've got about 2,500 that are in Kuwait or on the way there. Baghdad, we had an analyst on our show Monday, our Middle East analyst, Edward Uranian from Egypt, who gave 10 days before he thought Baghdad was going to fall to ISIS. Are we going to be fighting our way out of there? Is it going to be a Saigon evacuation situation? Remember that?
Well, I'll tell you, I am concerned about what's happening. As you know, ISIS is now on the march to take almost all of Al-Anbar province. As you know, that they are there at from the latest intelligence we are in the fight to take Haditha Dam, which is a significant asset that's there in Al-Anbar province, right outside of Baghdad. That's a strategic dam for that region, one that we obviously want to make sure that the Iraqis maintain control of. So they are on the precipice of taking all of Al-Anbar, and as you know, Baghdad, all around the outskirts of Baghdad is Al-Anbar province, and the next step is Baghdad. So in answer to your question, John, yes, Baghdad, I believe, is in danger, as well as other strategic elements there, including Haditha Dam, which ought to be concerning to folks because, securing those key assets there, and obviously the harm that can come from somebody taking the Haditha Dam and then breaking the dam, and then the impact on population centers around there is concerning for everyone.
Congressman Wittman serves on the Armed Services Committee, chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee. What do we do here? I mean, we have no authorization of war. We have 1,600 troops there. No one has a clear picture of what victory would look like. The coalition forces, Congressman, they're not going to be sending anybody in. Turkey has already said that. No one is sending anybody in, so we're kind of stuck here dropping bombs. It's clearly not working. I mean, as chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, what do you recommend we do?
John, we need to have a clear strategy, and the strategy on what we do to defeat ISIS. But it has to be broader than that. We have to have a strategy as a nation of what we're going to do to address Islamic extremism that we see happening not just in the Middle East, but also in Africa. If we are truly going to defeat this and make sure that this radical form of Islam doesn't perpetrate other areas of the world and cause these destabilizing efforts that can bring down governments, and this as a caliphate that's being pursued by al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is one of many instances, I think, that can unfold in the months and years to come if we don't have a comprehensive policy. And it's great to have partners, but if you don't define exactly what those partners are going to do, in other words, what do you need them to do? What aircraft will they fly in to help in this air campaign? What elements will they put on the ground? Turkey has to be part of that. I mean, I've traveled there to Turkey,
right,
and have spoken with folks on the ground and visited there. In fact, we tell Turkey when this backlash started to occur against Bashar al-Assad, and then we saw the opposition forces in Syria begin to mount that war against Bashar Assad. We helped Turkey. We brought in Patriot missile batteries to protect them from Assad. And I can tell you, President Erdogan, I think, has to say that Turkey is going to be there as an ally and as a help to the United States in combating ISIS in Syria. They know Syria better than anyone else. They are, I believe, threatened also by this. I understand the difficulty in that they don't like Assad, and they believe if we defeat ISIS, it could strengthen Assad. I understand that, but they have to look at it and say that ISIS right now is a bigger threat than Assad is. And I understand, too, that they have concerns with the Kurds and the Peshmerga there. Well, we can keep them out of having to get into the war against ISIS in Iraq and have them help us in Syria. So we have to get commitments from these partners as to what they will do on the ground, that is, boots on the ground, because, as you know, ISIS has captured territory. The only way that we regain that territory is with boots on the ground, and airstrikes can only do so much. But,
right.
You know, the way ISIS got that territory is with those boots on the ground.
That's right.
Now, the question boils down to, John, whose boots on the ground? I don't believe that we need to be putting in massive U.S. forces there like we did in the initial invasion of Iraq or the subsequent Operation Iraqi Freedom. But there has to be boots on the ground if we are going to retake that territory. And those boots on the ground, in my mind, have to include countries like Turkey and the other Arab nations there, especially the Sunni Arab nations. The difficulty is they have to trust us. They have to believe that we are going to go in and pursue this operation to retake that territory, to pursue this defeat of ISIS with all the seriousness that it takes to be successful. And if not, they're going to be hesitant to jump in with us because they don't want to be there and then be left by themselves if the United States moves out or does something different than what was originally planned, and that is for the effort to defeat ISIS.
Dr. Wittman, I want to get back to the Turkey situation where basically this is our ally in NATO. Turkey has the second biggest military in NATO to the U.S. We've bailed them out 2 times, as you mentioned. What juncture, does President Obama pick up the phone and say, look, you guys are either in or we got to ask ourselves, why are you even our ally? Why are you even in NATO?
Well, he absolutely needs to have a heart-to-heart discussion with President Erdogan and say, we need you. I've spoken with folks in the Turkish-American business community here in the United States. They are adamant that Turkey needs to be there helping the United States in this effort to defeat ISIS. Turkey is a critical ally there. As you said, they are probably the strongest NATO partner that the United States has.
Right.
They have to come to our aid. And again, they've done a great job in putting up refugee camps for Syrians that come across the border to protect Syrians. They've done a great job on the humanitarian side. They, though, have to bring their military assets to the table to help us defeat ISIS. Without them, I don't believe that we can be successful. They shouldn't hesitate. You know, I understand their concerns about Bashar Assad, but they should not hesitate in helping us defeat ISIS because for them, I believe it's a threat. And remember the things, too, John, that they can do. Many of the fighters that are joining ISIS come through Turkey.
Right.
They can at least be very aggressive in shutting down their borders and making sure that those fighters coming across the borders don't come in. And I've been to their borders there. I've actually been into Syria through the Turkish borders. They're pretty secure borders. They can manage the flow of people in there. And also, too, they are in a perfect situation to gather intelligence on what's happening there on the ground because of the people that from Syria that come back across the border to refugee camps in Turkey. There are a lot of things that they can be doing in addition to an active military combat role that would be helpful in this process. And we need to do everything possible to get them into a more active and direct role in helping us defeat ISIS.
Let me just ask you straight out. If we had to commit a large number of troops, I don't know how you defined large number, but through sequestration, President Obama got rid of a lot of weapons. He got rid of a lot of majors and captains. Here's my question straight out. Are we ready?
Well, John, we are ready, but not in the way that I think we need to be ready. And let me explain that. We are a mile wide, but only an inch deep. In other words, we are initial force. So when the president calls upon our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, and our airmen, that first wave are trained and equipped, and they're ready to go. They can pursue the fight better than anybody on the face of the earth. But what's always made us a military to be feared is that not only is that first line of units that come in prepared, but also the second line, the third line. So our bench is deep, and we've got what we need. You know, one of the things I do as chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee is to travel around to visit our men and women in the military to understand the challenges they face. I was just recently down visiting the 82nd Airborne Division down in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and our 82nd Airborne is ready to go. But the key is the bench that we have, and that is not just the first units that go in, but what about the units that would back them up to come in after that? That's where my concern is, and that's where we are lacking in the direction we need on providing readiness in the force. And that's one of the things I've been focusing on, especially in this year's budgeting effort and in our National Defense Authorization Act, to make sure that we get training back up to the place it needs to be, to make sure that our Army brigades are getting to the national training centers, to make sure that our sailors are getting out there on their pre-deployment training, to make sure our pilots are able to get cockpit time to fly, to make sure they maintain their certifications. Those are the things that make our fighting force the greatest the world's ever known. We have work to do there, John, to make sure that we get there. And as you know, there's not just one place in the world that could command our attention. And my concern is that if we go to one place, we're going to do well. Mm-hmm. But if we have to go to multiple places, that's really going to stretch us to the point where we're going to have a difficult time doing the things we need to do. And remember, what that means for those men and women that don't have the proper training or don't have the proper equipment, if we ask them to go, is that, as our military leaders call it, they say it's greater risk. But you know what greater risk is? That's great, more casualties, and that's unacceptable by any measure. And when we talk about risk, I want us to talk about what that truly means, and that is more men and women that are in danger of not coming back to their families, and that, by any measure, shouldn't be acceptable for our nation.
Dr. Wittman, do you believe President Obama, should go to Congress, Tim Kaine's War Powers Act proposal, and get clear authorization before he goes forward with anything else?
I do, John. I believe the president needs to do two things. First of all, is I believe for the current operations, he needs an authorization of the use of military force. I do not believe the one that was put in place in 2002 to authorize the use of military force in Iraq covers the operations happening today in Iraq or Syria. And I believe that we need to have a debate about the element of war. What are we doing as a nation to combat and defeat Islamic extremism around the world? I think there needs to be a broader strategy than just defeating ISIS, because remember, we go after Al-Qaeda, weaken them, here comes ISIS. If we go after ISIS, weaken and defeat ISIS, then what's the next group? Al-Nusra, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram. There's many of them out there that then come back, I believe, to take their place. If we don't have a comprehensive strategy to say, this is what we are going to do to defeat Islamic extremism around the world, then we will never be successful. We'll end up having a whack-a-mole strategy. You know, one of these groups pops up, we defeat that one, here comes the next one. So we've got to have an across-the-board strategy. I want the president to communicate that strategy and have Congress act on that strategy to say, this is the strategy. We have declared war against extremism. This is what we're going to do to defeat it.
So, Congressman, are you in favor then? You're in favor of Senator of Virginia Tim Kaine's War Powers Act, right?
Well, the War Powers Act, which was adopted a number of years ago, I think, yes, is invoked by the president's current actions. As you know, he's allowed to take actions essentially for the first 180 days of this effort. But after that, under the War Powers Act, I do believe the president has to come to Congress to get authorization. I do believe Congress needs to be involved. You know, our founding fathers, too, constitutionally provide for Congress to be the body that declares war, and they wanted that balance of powers. They didn't want the executive branch to have the sole power to declare war. They wanted to make sure that the legislative body was part of that process. I believe the legislative body, the Congress, has to be part of that.
Question. We have up to 10,000 expired student visas, or we have no idea. Homeland Security has no idea where any of these people are. Does that keep you up at night?
John, it does. The entire visa program concerns me in this country. As you know, as I travel to other nations, when I travel there on a visa, it's explicit as to how many days I'm going to be there. I have to tell them exactly where I am. If I change locations without telling them, they can incarcerate me. Or if I overstay my visa, they can incarcerate me. We need to do a much better job in this nation on our visa program. 40% of the people here illegally are here on overstayed visas. We have an obligation for a workable immigration program and for national security reasons to make sure we keep up with that visa program, that we know exactly where people are, and when they overstay visas, that we enforce the law, and that is that these folks are deported because they've overstayed their visas. And as you know, if you overstay a visa, you automatically fall into being penalized under the law. Let's make sure we enforce the law in doing that.
That's going to be the final word. We want to thank Congressman Rob Wittman for being with us. If you want more information, go to Wittman, that's 2 T's, Wittman.house.gov,